I'm Paul Comfort, and on this episode of Transit Unplugged, we talk to John Rossant. John is a good friend of mine, had a recipe in our comfort food cookbook. He lives part-time over in Italy and is the founder and CEO of CoMotion. CoMotion is a global platform where some of the most innovative transportation and technology companies, as well as civic and business leaders from across our mobility ecosystem, explore, collaborate, and interact to share ideas, and they make deals at these conferences. And there's a big one coming up. It is CoMotion Miami. CoMotion Miami is coming up April 29th and 30th at Miami-Dade College's AI Center. We're going to be going there and filming an episode of Transit Unplugged TV. And today, John and I talk about what we can expect when we get there, what you can expect when you get there, because you probably want to come down there and join us. It's going to be a great time in a great location. Some of the top speakers are there. We'll talk about them. Some great innovative products, what I call not even cutting edge, but bleeding edge products, will be on display there, including autonomous vehicles with their steering wheel. The company's going to be there that's looking at doing gondolas to LA's Dodger Stadium and the robotics, delivery bots, all kinds of things are going to be there. We hope to film those items when we get there. And today we're going to talk to you in depth with John about them and what's happening with hydrogen, which is rising as a great fuel source for public transportation vehicles across the world. Take a listen to this interview with John Rossant. I'm Paul Comfort, excited to have you with us on this special episode of Transit Unplugged, the world's leading transit executive podcast. Today, I have my good friend, John Rossant, who is founder and CEO of CoMotion. It's a global platform where the most innovative transportation and technology companies, as well as civic and business leaders from across the mobility ecosphere, explore, collaborate, and interact to share ideas and make deals. A little bit different than some, John, huh? You're making deals at your conference, aren't you? You're a deal maker, man.
Sure, that's the name of the game, man.
There you go. So CoMotion, I've been to a bunch of them. CoMotion organizes world-leading future mobility gatherings called CoMotion Miami and CoMotion LA, two of the hot transit tech cities in America and really in the world. They produce the Fast Forward podcast, where I've been a guest in the past, and publish a weekly Substack CoMotion News, which I love, by the way. It's a great place to get news and information with incisive news and analysis from the mobility revolution. John is also, and I'm particularly interested in this, the president of the Monaco Hydrogen Alliance. This is the first platform exclusively dedicated to mobility and renewable hydrogen. John also sits on the advisory board for the Alliance for Southern California Innovation and NEOM. And John, I remember you and I have been friends for, 5 or 10 years. And I remember being at the first LA, one of the first CoMotion LA conferences, and I was just blown away by the technology you've got there. And it has a very different feel than other traditional transit conferences, which I love. It feels edgier and it feels more almost on the bleeding edge, not just cutting edge. So bravo to you and your team.
It's high praise coming from you. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. And John, of course, those of you who got the Comfort Food Cookbook will remember John from his recipe that he put in there. Let's start with that, John. Tell us about the recipe in Comfort Food and where that came from.
Well, in the earlier part of my life, I lived in Rome, Italy, where I met my wife and got married and started a family. And we had a good friend back in Rome who's unfortunately no longer with us, who was actually a poet. And she was also not only a published and well-known poet, but she was a great cook. She loved to eat. She loved to make great food. And she introduced me to the joys of good Italian wine. And she had a recipe that was so simple, but was so good. And it involves, if you can get your hands on very good, fresh yellow peppers and a little bit of saffron and some olive oil and pecorino cheese, that's all you need to make a really great pasta. And it involves just kind of patiently cooking the yellow peppers down to kind of liquid form and adding some saffron. Anyway, that's a great dish.
That's great. And I remember it was probably 2 years ago now, we actually did the book launch at CoMotion Miami. You and I did. The first time the book was released, we did a book signing. It was great. The book has gone on to great acclaim around the world. And thank you for your part in that. And it just shows the innovation that you're known for. You live part-time in Turin, Italy, and that's where we're talking from today, right?
That is absolutely. I'm kind of between LA and Turin, which is the LA Turin axis. Don't ask, but
well, I'm excited to be with you in Miami, which is coming up very soon, which is the CoMotion Miami conference, and it is April 29th through 30th. It's the theme is New Reality, New Opportunities. It'll be at Miami-Dade College AI Center. We'll be there filming an episode of Transit Unplugged TV. So for those of you who want to see it in person, we invite you to join us there. And then afterwards, we'll have an episode of Transit Unplugged TV, which showcases some of the stuff there. John, tell us about it, this year's theme and what's going on there.
Yeah, I mean, we're calling it New Realities, New Opportunities. I mean, there's a new reality, of course, which is the new administration in Washington, which is changing some of the rules of the game. And I think, they're not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere. So we have to get used to it and adapt over the next 3 years, three and a half years. In some cases, could be a negative for cities because one of the expectations is that the funding spigot from the federal government to municipalities will decline this year and in coming years. So cities have to be more creative about finding ways to finance sustainable mobility, sustainable transportation projects going forward. And it's at a difficult moment because, tax receipts are going down, et cetera. It's not an enormously strong economy. So, we have to be creative. One of the interesting things that we're going to be doing in Miami is we're launching a new international task force called the Summit Task Force, the Sustainable Urban Mobility Investment Task Force. And it looks at precisely some of the new financial instruments that cities can use to finance, new metro lines, new electric bus fleets, et cetera, given that in the United States, the federal largesse is probably going to go down.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing too. Actually, I'll be in Washington, D.C. this week, the week we're recording, the first week of April, going on to the Hill. I'll be meeting with House and Senate leaders, meeting with the Federal Transit Administration, meeting with APTA, and we're going to get a pulse on what's happening and report back to our listeners. So I think it's great. I actually just spoke at a conference in Texas a couple weeks ago, and that was my theme, John. It was a new year, a new administration, and a new you. So it seems to be the theme, huh?
Yeah, but we also, we want to look on the positive side, and that's
right.
why we say new realities, but new opportunities. There's still a lot of opportunities out there. There's a lot of technological innovation that is still going forward. And, I thank you for pointing out that CoMotion is a place where these kinds of technological innovations are discussed. And I think one of the real differentiating things about what we do at CoMotion is that we talk about innovation and cutting edge and bleeding edge technology, but the public sector is very much a part of that. We see that, we believe that mobility takes place in the public right of way. Mobility will always be a extremely regulated industry. And so that's why it's so important to bring public and private together. And that's kind of at the heart of what we try to do at CoMotion. So it skews pretty evenly between 50% public sector, 50% private sector.
Do you guys do like a Shark Tank kind of thing still there where people present their latest technology? And you have another conference too.
Yeah, but we also kind of reverse it. So instead of having cool startups pitch their cool technology to clients or to the public sector, we have the public sector heads of departments of transportation and people like that pitching to the private sector in the sense, this is what we need.
Wow.
And people find this extremely useful.
Yeah.
So we begin each day with this breakfast, which is pitching the private sector, essentially.
Okay, that's interesting.
Instead of the other way around.
Yeah, that's great, man. And you've got some amazing speakers coming up. I've looked, by the way, thank you. I'm going to be moderating a panel, which I think will be pretty cool. I'll talk about that in a minute. But
we always love having you on stage, Paul.
Thank you.
You really bring a lot of insights, and you're just a great presence on stage. So.
Thanks. I feel like I'm a professional moderator now. That's what I do a lot of times is moderate these panels. But tell us about some of the other great speakers you've got coming up.
Well, we've of course got the two key mayors from Miami, Mayor Daniela Levine Cava, who's the mayor of Miami-Dade County, which is the big conglomeration of cities where Miami is, and also our old friend Francis Suarez, who's the mayor of Miami itself, the city of Miami. We also have other mayors. For example, the mayor of Pretoria, the capital of South Africa, is coming into CoMotion Miami, which is quite a long trip. And she, in fact, is going to be part of this new task force we're setting up on finding innovative financing mechanisms for cities, because it's not only an American conversation, but it's also very much a global conversation. One of the interesting things about this new task force is that also global cities have to find new and innovative ways to finance big projects. So the World Bank, for example, estimates that over the next 30 years or so, we'll need around $50 trillion. That's a teeny trillion.
Yeah.
But for new investments in sustainable transportation technology around the world. And currently there's about a $10 trillion gap between, what central governments can finance, et cetera. So cities really have to be very creative in how they finance these new things and find that, $10 trillion. So often, if you think about the world financial system that was pretty much organized after the Second World War, it basically has nation states rather than cities at the center of it. And so often outside the United States, cities don't have access to financial markets for a variety of reasons, the same way that American cities do have quite a lot of access via municipal funding, municipal bonds. So it's kind of a complicated but very, very important subject, because if we don't find these financial resources, we're not going to be able to put in the new kinds of sustainable transportation systems that we need in our cities.
Just for people who may be interested or may be attending, on Tuesday, I'll be on the leadership stage at 4:30 p.m., moderating what you and I just talked about, John. It's a panel on autonomous mobility at scale, safety, policy, and real-world deployment. Nat Ford will be there, of course, from the JTA, leadership from Miami-Dade, and some other folks there, too, from Zoox and NTSB. It ought to be an amazing panel. Thanks for setting me up with that, man.
Well, that's good. No, thank you, because it's, it could not be a more important topic. I mean, autonomous vehicles are here, and they're here to stay. It's only going to grow. As you well know, Florida has been a leader in thinking about how autonomous vehicles will and can navigate our cities in the future, in terms of, really smart legislation, smart regulations around that. So I think the whole transit community can learn a lot from how Florida is doing it.
Yeah, Nat Ford at JTA has had that test and learn facility, and now he's announced that Holon, the manufacturer from Europe, is going to bring our first America-based manufacturing plant so they can meet Buy America requirements, et cetera, I guess. So that's coming supposedly soon. He was just on Capitol Hill last week. I saw him do a post on that.
Oh, great.
Yeah, a lot of good stuff happening. And when we come back in just a minute, John, I'm going to ask you about how you put together these private and public sector leaders a little bit more and dive into that. And plus, I want to dive into hydrogen and what you're doing in Monaco and all that right after this special announcement. Hey, Transit Unplugged listeners, this is Paul Comfort. Something big is coming. Transit Unplugged has grown in ways we've never imagined, from in-depth conversations with top transit leaders to award-winning travel videos reaching audiences of millions around the world. We've been on an incredible journey together. Now it's time for the next chapter, a fresh look, a bold new vision. But don't worry, our mission stays the same: to inspire with meaningful stories, to spark industry conversations, and showcase the best in public transportation and mobility. This rebrand represents our growth, fresh energy, and our commitment to you, our listeners and viewers. The countdown starts now. Stay tuned and let us know what's been your favorite Transit Unplugged moment. And we're back with John Rossant, who is founder and CEO of CoMotion. We're talking about the upcoming CoMotion Miami conference. John, I was just in Kansas City for our company conference, Think Transit, and Frank White, the CEO, was talking about the World Cup coming to the U.S. and how a lot of cities are getting ready for that. Texas, too. A lot of cities are happening here. I think in Canada, Mexico, and the U.S. Are you addressing that at all at the conference?
Absolutely. It's going to be front and center because Miami, of course, is one of the big World Cup cities next year, and it's really coming up fast.
Yeah.
So we've got Tanya Mahan from the FIFA World Cup organization, so that'll be great. We have people from Los Angeles who are looking at the World Cup. How cities approach and deal with mega events like this from a transit point of view could not be more important, because transit is really at the heart of whether you're going to have a successful event or not, because it involves moving vast numbers of fans, across from venue one to venue two, et cetera. And doing that in a kind of seamless way will really contribute to the success of the event. So one of the things, at all, whether it's CoMotion LA or CoMotion Miami, but over the last couple of years, there has been a big focus on mega events. And of course, in LA, where we have our CoMotion LA conference, we also have not only the World Cup next year, but in 2028, the Olympics, which, is a whole other kind of challenge. I mean, it's just a really big deal.
Yeah, we did a recent episode of our Transit Unplugged TV show there, and featuring, how they're getting ready for the Olympics. We had Conan on there, the COO, and a bunch of other folks, the CIO, and actually, it was our biggest watched show ever in California. We had thousands of viewers in California. Of course, they're all interested in how they're going to do a transit first Olympics there and try to move cars out of the equation.
Yeah. But I think if you look at some of the other speakers in Miami, like Michael Inabinet from HNTB, or Dmitry Vanchukov, the head of Uber Transit, everyone's going to be talking about mega events and about the World Cup. That's right. Really coming up fast. And
I saw Collie Greenwood's going to be there too from MARTA. That's cool.
Yeah, another great speaker that I really need to mention is, of course, Stacy Miller, who Mayor Levine Cava has appointed to be the new head of the Miami-Dade Department of Transportation and Public Works. She started April 7th, so this will really be the first opportunity that she has to give a vision of what she has in mind over the next few years in Miami-Dade. So very excited about that.
One of the things I love about your conference too, John, is it's just not like on buses and trains like a lot of traditional transit, but you've got aviation, you've got vertical takeoff and landing vehicles there, you've got all kinds of stuff. Who do you have coming speaking kind of on that? Anybody cool this year?
Yeah, I mean, we have Joby will be there. It's one of the leaders in the space. I'm not sure if anybody is coming from Archer, but Eve, which is another eVTOL group based in Florida. So
you got somebody from the Paris airport, right?
And Aéroport de Paris, which owns not only the Paris airports, but owns a bunch of other airports in France and in Europe. Oh, wow. So they're a big actor in the kind of aviation space in Europe, and thinking very proactively about how electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft can be integrated into airport systems in the future.
When people go to the CoMotion, it's not just walking outside. A lot of times, is it going to be outside, by the way, your expo this year, where people get to see
it's sort of in and out. I mean, the sessions will be inside, air conditioned, and we are in Miami. But there is, there are a lot of things outside, and we're not a trade show, but we encourage people to kind of bring gadgets to look at or vehicles, because it's always nice, sort of. Kicking in the tires.
I love that. That's what I love about it.
For sure.
We're going to showcase some of that on our show too. But tell us more about, I love your evening receptions. You have some great work sessions, a challenge. Talk to us about what else people will experience when they're at CoMotion Miami this year.
Well, you mentioned the challenge. And this year, we're partnering with the Miami Innovation Authority, which is a fairly new entity of Miami-Dade County. They support a whole variety of early stage growth companies to come up with sort of various kinds of technological innovations to make Miami-Dade better adapted to citizens' needs. And a lot of what they look at is mobility. So they're doing a challenge this year, which we're helping out with. And so we'll be hearing from some of the companies involved in that challenge. So I'm really excited about that. As you say, there's always a lot of side events. And I think a big part of, the value of CoMotion is meeting people and, building your own network. And, often it's in sort of informal discussions in the corridor or over a beer at night where you really learn things and you come away with deep insights about the direction.
Yeah, absolutely. I love all those things. Last time I was in Miami with you 2 years ago, I remember the opening reception, man. You had a DeLorean right there. And of course, that's, the coolest car ever, for those of us of a certain age, remembering Back to the Future. So love all the kind of neat things you've got going on there. What is the mission for CoMotion? What's your game plan?
Ultimately, look, our mission is, we believe in a future of, sustainable, seamless, multimodal mobility in cities. We think that the seamlessness is a really key element in the future. The future is multimodal. And one of the really interesting things that we look at is all the amazing new modes of mobility that are coming down the pike. And you mentioned, advanced air mobility options. And you're right. We were very, very early on. I think in the very first CoMotion LA 8 years ago, we in fact had a discussion of advanced air mobility, and no one had really thought about it, was thinking about it back then. But it is going to be part of an urban region's mobility options in the future.
Yep.
And instead of getting in an Uber to go to LAX, if you live in Hollywood Hills, for example,
right,
you're going to hop on an electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft and do that trip in 5 minutes. That would maybe otherwise take an hour.
Yeah, I can't wait for that.
Yeah,
I want an autonomous VTOL to come and land in my front yard, pick me up for $99, and take me to the roof of the FTA building in downtown DC. Beat all that traffic. It's about an hour drive. I bet you we could do it in 15 minutes. So
yeah.
From the Eastern Shore.
It's a future that is starting to come into focus. And same way you have, I think we were among the first to start talking about maritime mobility. And we see that also, a lot of cities are on the water.
That's right.
And, how you get from point A to point B efficiently could involve a trip on the water. That doesn't have to be Venice. It could also be New York City.
That's right. Or Washington, D.C. I was just there this last week with Randy Clark. We were doing an episode featuring how to get around Washington, D.C. using transit instead of cars. And we rode the water taxi right behind, Georgetown, across the water from there. So Georgetown Park. It was great. One of the other great things you're working on, John, that you and I are in alignment on is the power of hydrogen as a new sustainable, zero emission fuel. Of course, here in America, we have 7 hydrogen hubs that were outlined in the IIJA that were funded and are starting to come into focus, but it's still very slow. It feels like we're dragging our feet on hydrogen a little bit. What's going on with hydrogen around the world, and what are you doing with it?
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that, because it's something that we've always looked at somewhat at CoMotion. Certainly hydrogen for trucking, heavy duty trucking is a really important use case, because you just can't get batteries. They're going to be so big and so heavy to propel a truck long distances that there won't be any room for cargo. And so the great thing about hydrogen is that it has 4 to 5 times the energy of lithium ion batteries. And so you can really go the distance, which is why, for example, Joby, who I mentioned, which is one of the players in the electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft, is very advanced in hydrogen, because they recognize that a battery powered little aircraft that needs a lot of power to rise vertically, if you use batteries, you're not going to have a lot of range. And so they retrofitted one of their eVTOLs for hydrogen fuel cell, and had a test flight last summer of close to 600 miles.
Wow.
So that completely opens up a new kind of regional mode of demand-driven sustainable transportation, getting from your house to perhaps not to the center of Washington, but maybe to a suburb
New York City,
or New York City. Yeah.
It's only a 4-hour drive. So wow, that's amazing. And so tell me about the Monaco Hydrogen Alliance. What is that, and what do you do?
Yeah, we set that up around 4 years ago as a nonprofit. It so happens that we've actually done a lot of work in Monaco over the years, and I'm quite friendly with Prince Albert, the ruler of Monaco. He's a very open-minded individual, is almost completely focused on fighting climate change and coming up with sort of zero carbon solutions for, transportation. There are, I think, about 300 electric charging stations in Monaco. They're all free. Anybody can use them and charge up your car for free. We felt that the world needed a kind of really focused initiative on mobility and renewable hydrogen, green hydrogen, and to look at the sort of next generation of planes, trains, trucks, boats that will be running on hydrogen. This is not something for tomorrow. There are some pain points about using hydrogen. It's a very, very small atom. Indeed, it's the smallest. It's the most abundant atom in the universe, by the way, the most abundant element. But it's a tricky one because it's so small, the atoms can leak out. So you have to take extra care not to have that happen. It's combustible. It's not so easy. But what's interesting, really, really interesting about the hydrogen space is that the innovations are starting to happen now. If you think about battery electric, it's really been 20 years where the greatest minds in the world have been focused on how to make batteries more efficient. That's just starting now in the hydrogen space. And some of the things we're learning is that we can really bring down the costs of producing, of making hydrogen, of storing it, of transporting it, et cetera. So I think, these are things that are coming down the pike. It's very, very exciting. I don't think we're going to see hydrogen. There are hydrogen cars, but I think the widespread adoption, a kind of a hydrogen-powered Tesla, I think that's not for the next few years. I think trucking is certainly going to happen pretty soon. There are already hydrogen-powered trains. And the beauty of hydrogen is completely friendly to the environment. The only thing that comes out of the tailpipe is water, drops of water. There's no carbon involved. So it's a very, very exciting space. And again, precisely because of the new kinds of technologies that we're starting to see across the whole value chain of hydrogen.
And as you know, it's really starting to take the transit industry, buses, by storm. My good friend Kurt Conrad, who is CEO of the Stark Area Regional Transit Authority in Canton, Ohio, where the NFL Football Hall of Fame is, he wrote a chapter in my latest book, The New Future of Public Transportation, and he heads up the I don't know what it's called, but it's like the central part of America. They've got a center of excellence, and my friend Michael Oglesby kind of got it started in Sunline Transit out there in south of LA, and Doran Barnes, CEO of Foothills, he's got the largest fleet in America of hydrogen buses, and so I'm excited about this.
Very forward, yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited about it, John. I look forward to continuing to help you promote hydrogen fuel, both here in the United States and around the world, because I think it is a great sustainable, and it is, in my mind, it is almost ready for prime time based on the people I've talked to in the bus industry. And so I think it's our time now for hydrogen fuel. So I'm excited about it. And
I guess it's really kind of infrastructure. And
that's right.
We have to build out hydrogen infrastructure. So it's always the eternal chicken and egg. I mean,
what comes first?
Until the demand is there, they're not going to build the infrastructure. But if there's no infrastructure, the demand won't be there. But it's going to happen for sure.
Yeah, that's great. Well, you can hear more about this and learn more about all the things we've talked about today at John's upcoming CoMotion Miami. It's going to be held Tuesday and Wednesday, April 29th and 30th in Miami, Florida. And if you're interested in attending, there's still time for you to sign up. It's at CoMotionMiami.com. Again, CoMotion Miami.com. You can learn more and you can register there. We'll be filming, as I mentioned, Transit Unplugged TV, an episode there, hopefully interviewing a few folks for the podcast. John, as always, thank you for your leadership in our industry and for sharing a few moments with us today from Turin, Italy, on what's coming up and what's going on in your world.
It's always a delight to exchange with you, Paul. Really, I love talking with you about our favorite subject, the future of transit.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Transit Unplugged Podcast. We're so glad you're here. My name is Julie Gates. I'm the executive producer of the show. And our goal is to create programs that promote the great things going on in the transit industry by providing you with behind-the-scenes access with industry executive leadership so we can work together to find innovative industry solutions. We would love to have you be a part of the Transit Unplugged community by having you sign up for our newsletter. Head to the show notes to find the link. Thanks for listening to Transit Unplugged with Paul Comfort, our favorite transit evangelist, and we'll catch you next week. Thanks for tuning in.